Everyone to another webinar. That's another opportunity to learn more about our Jewish holidays, which are such wonderful touchstones throughout the year. They come every year. Maybe we learn a little bit more, we experience a little bit more, but there's always more to uncover, more to experience. And so this year, I would like to dive into with you on an introductory level onto all the elements of Sukkot, but at the same time, we're going to go pretty deep into what it is. So, Sukkot. Sukkot in Judaism is known as Zman Simchatenu, the holiday or the time of our joy. It is a celebratory holiday. It comes in that sense right after the High Holy Days, the days of awe, which are not necessarily holidays of joy. And I just love that juxtaposition, that it feels so Jewish, of going through the High Holy Days, of being judged in self-reflection and atonement and contrition. And we come out of that. Yom Kippur was what? A few days ago, boom, we're ready to go to Sukkot, right? You don't even have time to breathe and you're on to the next holiday. And it really feels like a turning point into a celebration. So what are we celebrating? How do we celebrate it? What is Sukkot? So let's begin at the beginning with two passages from the Torah that describe what Sukkot is and why we do it. So in Exodus 23, soon after they were liberated, the Jews were liberated from Egypt, God says, "There shall be a feast of ingathering." In other words, a harvest festival. At the end of the year, that's now, this is the end of the year, right after Rosh Hashanah, when you gather in the results of your work from the field. Okay? So it's clearly tagging Sukkot as being connected to harvest and to agriculture. And it's juxtaposed, I didn't bring it here, with a different holiday of Shavuot, which is also described there in an agrarian harvest. There it's the harvest of the grains and the cereals. Here it's the harvest of the fruit. Okay, so that's going to be a very important through line that we're going to want to trace. Sukkot as a celebration of harvest, plenitude, and gratitude. A little bit later in Leviticus, we get a more formal injunction about what we are supposed to do to celebrate Sukkot. There it tells us, "You shall live in Sukkot." So the name of the holiday comes from the Sukkah. We'll talk a lot about it. You can see one on the right-hand side, roughly translated as a booth. So you shall live in booths 7 days, right? Quite a fun order for God to give a community. Go live in a booth for 7 days. All citizens in Israel shall live in booths in order, so here we get a why, in order that future generations may know that I, God, made the Israelite people live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I, Hashem, are your God. So what is this? When were the people living in booths? During the 40 years of wandering in the desert. And so according to Leviticus, we live in Sukkot for 7 days in commemoration of the 40 years of wandering in the desert when God provided us with shelter. Now, what does that have to do with this time of year? That's an enigma. That's not very clear. So we're going to try to tease that out a little bit. What's going on? And as you notice, the first explanation here is that it all has to do with harvest. The harvest is not mentioned at all in Leviticus. And so some scholars of ancient Judaism, like Jacob Milgram, Baruch Levine, who are well-known biblical scholars, they argue that Sukkot began amongst the ancient Israelites as a fall harvest celebration with real field huts, as you can see in this picture, and was only later historically linked to the years of wandering after the Exodus. So if you are a farmer and you have many fields, it is going to be a pain in the tuchus to every day go far away in your field to harvest. So instead, you and your workers will sleep in a harvest hut, in a lean-to during the harvest time, so that you can be near your field and work day and night for your harvest, because that's really the main time of the year where you are making your money, you are bringing in the harvest. And so in celebration of that, Jews began to create these harvest huts even closer to their homes, eat in them, eat the harvest, and celebrate the divine gifts of the harvest. So originally, Sukkot seems likely, and that we see more in Exodus, right? That it was when you gather in the results of the work of your field, have a feast. Okay. And then later there was a linking of that holiday to the Sukkot, to the shelter of the Israelites who were wandering in the desert. And this is something that's very common in Jewish holidays, where there's an ancient link to agrarian ecology, seasons, and then it seems like eventually also Jewish history got mapped onto that as well. So that a Jewish holiday is a celebration both of nature and human relationship to the natural order, as well as the particular stories of the Jewish people. We can see this linkage even further in how you are supposed to build a sukkah. So let's look at the picture at the bottom, anatomy of a kosher sukkah. So how do you make a sukkah? Can you just sit in a cardboard box and say, I'm in a booth? No. There's a few core aspects of a sukkah, and we'll go over them. The first is something called schach, and that is the ceiling of the sukkah. And it has to be made out of loose vegetation that grew on the ground, right? It has to be detached from the ground. You can't have vines that are still growing from the ground, but it has to be something that grew organically, right? It cannot be plastic. It can't even be like processed beams of wood. It has to be in its natural organic state. It also has to create more shade than allow sunlight directly above you. Okay. But at the same time, it's not mentioned here, you also have to be able to see the stars. So it needs to be shady, but you need to have the feeling that you're outside. If you can't see the stars, then it's like, I'm in a house. We want that dance between you're outside, but you're inside the structure, but you're still connected to the outside world. The walls can be made of any material. Tarp, wood, lattice, get creative, whatever you want. There have to be minimally 2.5 walls. Why 2.5 walls? Because that is the minimum to create a sense of containment and enclosure. 2 walls is too open. 3 walls is a little bit unnecessary, but 2.5, already you start to have 2 corners and a sense of containment. So scholars point out here too that these rules, and I'm reading from the top, line up nicely with agrarian watch huts. They're built after harvest work when stubble, cut branches, and palm fronds are in hand. Even the decorative impulse, which we'll talk about a second, to decorate your sukkah, fits post-harvest surplus. Growing up, decorating our sukkah, I'm one of 7 children, was such a fun time. And you can see on the left-hand side an older German depiction of the family coming together to decorate the sukkah. On the right-hand side, a more contemporary image from Israel. And Sukkot is one of those rare holidays where beauty matters, right? Where in 2 ways. Jews have traditionally made beautiful Sukkot. Yes, they're meant to be impermanent, but they're meant to be playful and beautiful and pleasant to live in. When we come to the lulav and etrog, which is the things that you shake, there too, you're supposed to have one that is beautiful. So it's a rare holiday where beauty and aesthetics plays a key role. Okay, so why then exactly? So we've mentioned a few different reasons. Let's try to put it together. Why then do we eat and / live in a sukkah? And let me mention one more thing before we read that. The actual injunction is to live in a sukkah. So remember here in Leviticus, you shall live in Sukkot. Nowadays, most Jews don't live in the sukkah for 7 days. They eat their meals there, but they sleep at home. They'll take a bath at home. But it seems like the vision originally was go camping for a week, set up your sukkah. In fact, the rabbis in the Mishnah say to bring out all the china to the sukkah and leave it there. Right? You're really supposed to have a sense that you are living in the sukkah for 7 days. For various reasons, Jews began to not sleep in the sukkah, partially because while in the Mediterranean and the Middle East climates where Sukkot originates from, this time of year is nice, warm. It's a good time to sleep outside. But when Jews in Eastern Europe and Russia and Ukraine were celebrating Sukkot, this time of year was often rainy and cold. And so they found ways to not sleep in their sukkah. Some people still sleep in their sukkah. Some people do not. Okay, so why eat, or at least minimally eat your meals in the sukkah? So the classical reason that we saw in Leviticus, remember the journey. The Sukkah reminds us of the fragile huts the Israelites lived in while journeying through the desert after leaving Egypt. Right? And there's something beautiful there. It's a sense of celebrating the ways that God protects us, right? If Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are these days of God as judge, as one who sees clearly all my strengths and flaws of my character, Sukkot is a sense of the divine as one who protects us. It's a very different relationship. And that's why it's one of joy. But Sukkot is also a harvest festival. Now, Sukkah is a harvest booth. And in that sense, Sukkot is gratitude for the harvest. Whether or not we have fields that we harvest, this is a time of the year when people are harvesting and we can still acknowledge the bounty and gratitude for that which we will eventually eat. More existentially, Sukkot is also about learning from fragility. The Sukkah is temporary and shaky. It must be impermanent. For a Sukkah to be kosher, you can't leave it up for 12 months a year. You have to take it down, build it up. It has to be something that has the sense of impermanence. And you have to be content and be able to celebrate that experience of impermanence. That's a beautiful thing as well. So there's different values and understandings of why we eat in a sukkah. The late Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the chief rabbi of the UK, these are on his websites. You can print them out as Sukkot posters, but I thought they make beautiful points as well. On the left-hand side, he says, the universe is the space God makes for us. The sukkah, with its incomplete roof and its door open to strangers, is the space we make for God, right? So after Rosh Hashanah, which celebrates the creation of the cosmos, of the earth, Sukkot, we're kind of modeling that. We're making a little home, a little planet. We're welcoming in our friends. We're feeding them. We're being hospitable. We're offering kindness. So I love that image. And on the right-hand side, Rabbi Sachs says that you can live in a hut with only leaves for a roof, exposed to the wind, the cold, and the rain, and still rejoice, right? Sukkot is, again, as I said, the time of our joy. Is it really that joyous to eat and sleep in a little hut for 7 days? Rabbi Sachs says, yeah, joy is something we share with others. Joy is gratitude for the gift of life that we feel in the presence of the giver of life. We become eternal not by constructing buildings, but by opening ourselves up, making ourselves vulnerable to the eternal, to God himself, right? So here more focusing on the ways that it's imperative to find joy in fragility, in impermanence, and to find joy in the things that really matter. Growing up, we had this wonderful custom called Sukkot hopping. Basically, you finish your meal in your sukkah, and then you just like walk from house to house, and everyone's like, oh, come in my sukkah, let me show you my decorations, and you have a little snack, and you make a blessing, and then you go on to the next friend. And it was just really this like beautiful culture of people creating hospitable spaces for the community. And I think that's just a beautiful tradition. Okay, so that's just like the core of what a sukkah is. But now, Sukkot as a holiday is actually quite complicated because there's really 5 different things that are packed into one holiday. Okay, so we're going to unpack each of these things. Okay, so as you can see here, this is from our calendar. So we're on right here on the 5th to the top left. Tomorrow is Erev Sukkot. Erev is eve of Sukkot. So Sukkot will begin tomorrow night. Tuesday and Wednesday, here it says, are Sukkot 1 and Sukkot 2. Okay, that is the first days, and I'll explain why that S is in brackets in a moment. That is the opening of the festival, which is sanctified like Shabbat. So Jews who traditionally don't work or don't use electricity, don't drive their car, don't use commerce on Shabbat, will not do those things on Sukkot as well. The only difference is that since it is not Shabbat, but rather a Yom Tov, which is a holiday, you are allowed to heat up food for the celebration. You can't make a fire, but if you leave your oven on, you can put food in to cook it. That's the only difference from Shabbat. We eat in the sukkah, we wave the lulav, we'll talk about that. It also includes elaborate morning synagogue services where you bring your lulav to synagogue and there's an extended service that integrates waving the lulav when you recite the Hallel prayer, the Hallelujahs. There's an additional prayer where you walk around and you chant Hoshanas. So it's really, it feels like a Sabbath, except you're not eating at home, you're eating the sukkah, and you're doing this lulav and etrog thing. Okay. Then come 5 days of what's known as Chol HaMoed, intermediate days. Chol HaMoed is actually a fascinating locution, a phrase. Chol means secular, meaning like not holiday, but Moed means holiday. So it basically is it means the non-holiday days of the holiday. Okay, work during these days is permitted. So it's not like those other days. You can go to work, you can drive a car, but there's still a sense of we're in Sukkot. You still eat meals in the sukkah. You still shake the lulav every day. The festival spirit is alive in daily life, but it doesn't have the strictures of those opening days of Sukkot. Growing up, those were days we didn't have school on Chol HaMoed. And they were days instead where like everyone would go to amusement parks and go to baseball games. And it was like this just really fun time when the whole community was out and about doing joyous things. Then comes a lesser known aspect of Sukkot called Hoshana Rabbah. You can see it here. This will be next Monday on the 13th. And it is still a day of Chol HaMoed, right? So it's still a regular day. It's not a holiday day. It is Sukkot, but it's not a day with extreme strictures. And it's the climactic 7th day, right? So first day, second day, third, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so the next Monday will be the 7th day of Sukkot. On that day, there's extra synagogue circuits with lulav. There's willow beading customs. I'll unpack all that. There's prayers for rain and blessing as an echo of ancient water rituals. Okay, so we're going to focus on Hoshana Rabbah in a moment. We'll come back to it. Just tag that there's a separate kind of thing. Then comes 2 more days. You thought Sukkot was 7 days? No, it's 9 days. Then comes a day called Shmini Atzeret, which is, in translation, the 8th day of assembly. Here we're back to Yom Tov. We're back to that Shabbat climate where we're not doing work anymore. Technically, it's its own holiday. We don't even eat in the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeret. Instead, it is a day when we begin to pray for rain and linger one more day with God. Okay? If Sukkot is an agrarian harvest festival, it's also connected to nature because it is the beginning of the rainy season, right? It's beginning to look forward to the next harvest. And so praying for rain is a key part of Sukkot, and we'll talk about how that pops up. And so Shmini Atzeret is when we begin formally praying for rain in synagogue. The final day of Sukkot, which will be next Tuesday night and Wednesday, is my favorite day of the whole year, Simchat Torah, which means the joy of the Torah. It is a joyful finale. In the diaspora, it comes the day after Shmini Atzeret. In Israel, it's combined with Shmini Atzeret. We complete the Torah cycle, we dance with the Torah scrolls, and we begin Genesis anew, okay? So Simchat Torah has nothing to do with Sukkot. The reason it got added there just has to do with the fact that we start reading Genesis, the beginning of the 5 books of Moses, then, and so it got tagged on. Shmini Atzeret is kind of Sukkot, kind of not Sukkot, and then you have the 7 days before that. So there's a lot of different stuff going on in Sukkot. So let's walk piece by piece through what all these things are. So before moving forward, let's just talk a little bit more about the Sukkah, because you kind of, at the heart of Sukkot is the Sukkah, and especially that first day, Monday night, tomorrow night, and Tuesday. That's really the day when, if you're going to sit in a sukkah for one meal, that should be the day, right? The rabbis would say that is the heart, that is the biblical commandment, is the opening day of Sukkot, then you should eat in a sukkah. So how do you get a sukkah? Well, what's amazing is that a sukkah is meant to be DIY, right? It is meant to be something that you can just make by yourself. So, there's necessary materials, right? You want some decorations, chairs and tables, lighting, but what the materials are, how you construct it, you can go on Google and find 50 different DIY guides for how to make a sukkah for yourself. If that's too hard for you, we got you. There is, what do you know, Jewish capitalism. In the past 20, 30 years, several different companies have emerged, thrilled to sell you a pre-made sukkah, and you can just erect it. These are quite expensive. They probably begin around $500 and go all the way up. Um, but they'll deliver it to you, and it's quite easy to put up, and it'll last, as it says, 30 years. Okay? So there's different ways to make a sukkah. But making a sukkah with your family, it's such a sweet thing to do. And again, like as you see the one on the left, like it doesn't need to be sturdy, it doesn't need to be fancy. It really is supposed to have that sense of like, wow, I'm in a little dingy harvest hut and I love it and it's fun. So again, there's many guides out there for how to build yourself a sukkah. So what do you do in the sukkah? One of the main things you do in the sukkah is before you eat food, you make a blessing. So you can see on the right-hand side, when you're having a meal in the sukkah, anytime you eat in the sukkah, not only do you make the regular blessing that we make on food, you also make an additional blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu leishev basukkah. Blessed are you, God, who has sanctified us with his rituals, his mitzvot, and commanded us to dwell in the sukkah. So there's a sense that this is a unique mitzvah that you are celebrating. On the first day, you also say the Shachianu prayer, which is a blessing for something new, the beginning of a holiday. Okay, and you can see this on the left-hand side. This is an old wood cutting. On the top, it says the blessing of the sukkah, Birkat HaSukkah, and it has that blessing down here. One thing you might have noticed is that a sukkah looks a little bit, or a lot of it, like a chuppah, like the structure that Jews have traditionally gotten married under. Now, that's not, I don't think anyone would claim that that is its original intention, but there is something beautiful to the poetry there, that in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, again, it's a time of a sense of hierarchy. God is above us, judging us. And on Sukkot, we're coming into the divine embrace. We're coming into the chuppah with God. And that's a beautiful image that a lot of later Hasidic rabbis will develop. Okay, so I mentioned here that first days in parentheses. So in the diaspora, in America, wherever, anywhere besides for Israel, there are 2 days of that opening Sukkot, the opening days of the holiday. Excuse me. In Israel, there's only 1 day. Okay, why? So this is not just about Sukkot. This has to do with many holidays. Ancient Jews outside of Israel couldn't always know the exact day the new month began. So we have to back up here a little bit. Ancient Jews did not have a set calendar. Rather, it was a generative calendar. Every month, there was a certain court in Jerusalem that would await for 2 Jews to come and say, I saw the sliver of the new moon. They would interrogate them and make sure, did you see a star, a planet? Okay, the moon? Great. Then they would communicate that by lighting a big pyre of fire on top of a hill in Jerusalem, and then the next town would see it and light a fire in the next town until word would spread throughout Israel that it was a new month. Okay. Now, the problem is Sukkot is day 15 of the month, right? So let's say you're living in Spain in this ancient time period. It's quite likely that you wouldn't hear word about when day 1 of the month was supposed to be. And you might be a little confused. You had a sense, you saw the moon yourself, but you're not sure. Is the 15th day of the month of the moon, the full moon, which is tomorrow night, is it Monday night or is it Tuesday night? You're not sure. So the rabbis instituted a fascinating practice. Very Jewish thing. To stay safe, diaspora communities added an extra day to major festivals. So in Israel today, the first festival day then immediately goes to Chol Hamoed. So in Israel, Tuesday night, Jews will turn on their radios, drive their cars, even if they're religious. It is no longer the Yom Tov, the Shabbat aspect of the Sukkot. Whereas observant Jews in America will not do that until Wednesday night. Similarly, Passover and Shavuot are also 1 day at the start and end in Israel, whereas in America and elsewhere in the diaspora, they're 2 days. Now, you might say, okay, well, then why do we still do that today? We know the set calendar. Jews no longer establish when the month begins. We rather have a set calendar that we follow. Well, tradition. as Fiddler in the Roof would like to say it. Even after fixed calendars made exact dates knowable, diaspora Jews kept the second day as a marker of continuity and unity with the past. Reform and many other liberal Jews who don't value tradition in as much of itself, right? And clearly here is a case where the tradition is no longer necessary. They only celebrate one day in the diaspora. This is still kind of a contentious issue amongst different Jewish communities, 1 day versus 2 days. And some fascinating questions are like, if you're in America, but then you fly to Israel for Sukkot, should you do 1 day? Should you do 2 days? Lots of rabbinic literature on that. Okay, so that's why there's this discussion of 1 day versus 2 days. Okay, now let's move on to another fun part of Sukkot, which is the lulav. You can see here, these people holding these different pieces of botany. So what is this? What is the lulav? So again, we can look to the Leviticus. On the 15th day of the 7th month, that's tomorrow night, 7th month is the month of Tishrei, when you gather in the yield of the land. So here too in Leviticus, links Sukkot to harvest. You shall celebrate God's festival 7 days. On the first day of Sabbath, on the 8th day of Sabbath, right? That's what we talked about, right? So this is in Israel, not in the diaspora. And you shall on the first day, also notice something, you shall celebrate God's festival 7 days, but then on the 8th day is Sabbath, right? That's why there's this added festival called Shmini Atzeret, the 8th day after Sukkot. But here's the key part for us. And you shall on the first day take the fruit of a stately tree, fronds of palm trees, and a branch of a leafy tree, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days, and you shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord 7 days in the year, an everlasting statute for your generations, right? So not only do you eat in a sukkah, you also take 4 items of agriculture and rejoice with them before God. In the Bible, that meant bring them to the temple. Sukkot, like Passover and Shavuot, was a pilgrimage holiday. It's when Jews throughout Israel would come to Jerusalem for the holiday. So what exactly are these things? What's a stately tree? What's fronds of a palm tree? What's a leafy tree? What's a willow of the brook? So we, Jews, for a long time, have decided that it is these 4 objects here. So you can see that enumerated here. So the main one that it's named after is the lulav, which is this long palm branch. And there's different symbolism that later became connected to these different objects. The lulav represents the spine with which we stand strong. You then have the willows, which relate to the lips. They're supposed to look a little bit like lips, through which we speak out for others. So each part of this 4 botanical set correlates to a different part of our body. The myrtle, which is the hadassim, refers to the eyes with which we see those who are overlooked. It's supposed to look a little bit like the shape of an eye. And the etrog, in English called a citron, symbolizes the heart with which we feel for others. Okay, so that's a nice symbolic read. But what's going on here? Why on Sukkot do we take these objects and shake them around? What is that? Why did the Bible want that? So David Seidenberg, who's a wonderful Jewish teacher who really stresses the relationship between Judaism and ecology, has written really elegantly about this. And in an article from 2020 called The Shaman's Rainstick, the Eco-Torah of Sukkot, he points out the following. Sukkot is about water. Just as much, I'm just adding here, just as much as about harvesting what grew in the summer, it's also about praying for rain for what's going to come. The 4 species of the lulav are all about water too. The lulav itself, the date palm, was the most water-loving plant of the desert. The myrtle, the hadas, needs the most water of the mountain plants. The etrog fruit among agricultural trees requires the most rain to grow. And of course, the willows of the stream, that's what they're traditionally called, arvei nachal, are synonymous with abundant water, often growing with their roots right in the streams. Each of these species represents one of the primary habitats of the land of Israel: the desert, the mountain, the lowland, and the river. Together, the 4 species make a kind of bioregional map of the land of Israel. And they each hold in greatest abundance the rains that fell where they grow in the year that had passed. In other words, we take these objects as a way to pray for rain. We take these things that express, wow, last year it rained a whole lot, and look at these things that grew, right? They're fresh, they have to be harvested in the last year. And you're coming to God and you're saying, look, I'm celebrating the harvest. I'm celebrating those things that really, really need rain. Please bring more rain. Many Jews feel a little bit uncomfortable with this ritual. They say it's a little bit pagan. It's a little bit pagan, right? It feels like you're taking nature and you're praying for rain. You're shaking it for rain as a rain dance. You know what? Yeah, it's not pagan. Jews in the ancient world were deeply connected to ecology. And this is the way that we celebrate. This is the way we pray for rain. So what do you do with the lulav? So there's a specific way to hold it. You can see in the picture here. Generally, when you buy a lulav, it will come with this attachment thing, where the willows and the willows and the myrtle are kind of grouped together. So you hold that in one hand, you hold the etrog in the other hand. You stand facing east. You pick up the bundle with the etrog's pitum down. So the etrog has a little pointy thing on the top. So you first hold that upside down and you make a special blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shechianu v'kimanu v'gianu lazman hazeh. Sorry, that's wrong. First, you make this blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher yishanu mitzvah v'tzivanu al netilat lulav, who has commanded us to take up and shake the lulav. Then you make the shechianu. Then you turn the etrog upwards and you shake 3 times in each direction, as you can see in this illustration. And there's many different ways that people do this. So I'll just illustrate. Imagine this is the lulav. So if you're standing, you can kind of go like cha, da, da, then turn this way, da, 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 da. Some people go behind their back. Some people turn around. You go this direction, and then you go up, and then you go down. And you're shaking it in each direction. Again, this is an amazing, marvelous Jewish ritual. Right? There's not that much Jewish ritual that involves taking natural objects and worshiping with them. You can buy lulav on Amazon. If you're late, go on Amazon. You can order one. The Chabad was selling them. I don't think they still have any extra. You can call around if you'd like. But now Amazon sells a set for I think $40 that will come right to your door. I mentioned that the lulav and etrog are also things that are part of the synagogue service. In these 2 illustrations, you can see Jews in the synagogue with their lulav and etrog kind of walking around in circles. That was a key thing that goes back to the temple times when they would walk around the altar with their lulav and etrog. And I want to mention one thing that I didn't make slides for. There is also something that happens in the evenings of Chol HaMoed called Simchat Beit HaShoeva, which means the celebration of the water drawing. And this was an old temple ritual where every morning of Chol HaMoed, they would draw water from the nearest creek, and they would pour it. They would do a water libation on the altar. 364 days a year, 360 days a year, they would only pour wine, oil, and blood down the cisterns of the altar. But on Sukkot, they would pour water. Again, as part of the water rituals and water prayers of Sukkot. At night, all night long, before that water drawing, there was the biggest rager Jews ever threw. Every night in the temple, the Mishnah from the 2nd century says, if you hadn't seen the joy and the light coming out of the temple in those nights, you've never seen a party. You've never seen joy. Jews would juggle fire and dance, and the Levites would play music all night, and they threw these amazing temple parties. If you ever gone into a synagogue and seen in traditional synagogues that men and women sit in separate sections, according to tradition, that originated from the Sukkot temple parties. The parties got so crazy that the priest said, we got to separate the genders. And that was the first time that men and women were kind of segregated in a ritual context, just to kind of show the hype of those parties. There are still many communities that throw these amazing parties, with a lot of singing, a lot of dancing. But again, another way that you see Sukkot being connected to rain and agriculture. Okay, Hoshana Rabbah. Hoshana Rabbah is a strange holiday. I'm going to actually come back to I'm going to come back to that in a second. So, what is Hoshana Rabbah? So, I'm going to read you from 18th century Jewish law book to explain what is going on in this picture. Okay. The fifth day of Chol HaMoed is Hoshana Rabbah. So again, that'll be next Monday. The prophets instituted the custom that each person should take a special arava. What's the arava? The arava is the willow. On that day, besides the arava and the lulav bundle. So the lulav has 4 things, including the willows. But on Hoshana Rabbah, you take a different grouping of the aravot. It is a beautiful custom to take 5 branches of the willows and tie them together with a leaf of lulav. So you're taking 5 willows, tie them together. You should not take this arava, this new grouping of the willows, with the lulav, so separately. But when you begin to say a special prayer, you put down the lulav and etrog, and you take this bundle of 5 willows. For then we pray for water. So again, this is when we begin to pray for water. At the conclusion of the Hoshanos, that's the prayer that we say in synagogue, you wave the arava, the willows, and you beat it on the ground 5 times. It's this amazing ritual. A bunch of Jews smacking willows on the ground. And it is sufficient even if no leaves fall off in the process. Okay? There's a lot of speculation on why we do this. One intriguing answer is that when you smack willows on the ground, it makes a sound like rainfall. And maybe this was like an old ancient Jewish, it's not in the Bible, so maybe this was a more ancient Jewish folkloric, magical way to invite in the rains by smacking the willows on the floor and making these rain sounds. 2 years ago, my family and I were spending a few months in Israel. And the day before October 7th, 2 years ago, we went to, the day before October 7th was Hoshana Rabbah. October 7th, 2 years ago, was on Simchat Torah. This year, it'll be on Monday, on the beginning of Sukkot. And we went to the Kotel in the Old City to participate in one of the largest celebrations of Hoshana Rabbah. And I want to show you a 30-second video that I took, just so you can get a sense of what it looks like. So I don't know if you can tell exactly what's going on, but basically there's a leader of the prayer, says a word, everyone recites it back, shakes their lulav, and at the end of the phrase, everyone kind of dances around, shake the lulav. At the end of that, you smack it on the ground. So a strange little interlude within Sukkot. Finally, we come to Simchat Torah. Shmini Atzeret, there's not that much to say other than it is the day when we begin to pray for rain in synagogue itself, after we've done the rain ritual of the Shara. Simchat Torah is a completely new ritual, completely new holiday. It has nothing to do with Sukkot. You're no longer eating in the Sukkah. It's just tacked on to Sukkot. Why? Jews every Shabbat read 152nd, if that's how you pronounce that word, 52th of the 5 books of Moses. It's called a parsha, so that each year we complete the Torah scroll. This past week in synagogue, we basically concluded the Torah scroll, and on Simchat Torah, we will formally conclude it and begin again with the chapter from chapter 1 of Genesis. After you do that in the evening, there is an amazing, I don't want to say party, but an amazing celebration in synagogue where full of dancing. So what is it, this celebration of dancing with the Torah? The joyful finale to the high holy day Sukkot season. It's when we finish reading the Torah and start over immediately to express that Jewish life is a loop of lifelong learning, right? The second we close the book, we reopen it to page 1. Our relationship to Torah is not just one of reading, it is one in which we live within the text itself. The ritual of it, though, is something known as hakafot, which translates to circumambulation. After services in the evening, we dance and sing with the Torah scrolls in 7 circuits. So doesn't mean you walk around 7 times, but there's 7 kind of little like songs in which you walk around the temple, the center of the synagogue. There's often a lot of candy given to kids, a lot of singing. It's quite lively. If you've never been to synagogue on Simchat Torah, I highly recommend it. It is one of my favorite occasions. Right? Imagine you're in a book club, and at the end of the time when your club finished reading the book, you all threw a party and you danced around the room with that book because you loved it so much. That's Judaism. Okay, Jews love the Torah so much we dance with it when we finish reading it. Final verses of Deuteronomy and first of Genesis are read back to back, no break in the story. And aliyot for all. An aliyah is when you get called up to the Torah to make a blessing. Everyone gets an aliyah. This can take hours. That's why these services sometimes take so long, because everyone is called up one by one to the Torah, and kids are blessed under a talit canopy. And the theme of Simchat Torah is that we're shifting from harvest gratitude to unrestrained joy. After building shelters and praying for rain, we dance with the text itself, which is our portable homeland. Right? If the Sukkah is the impermanent home, the Torah is our permanent mobile home, that no matter where we are in the diaspora, that is always what we can go to. This year in the diaspora, that is Portland, there's a lot going on. So this is taken from the Federation's community calendar. You can access it online and click on each of these things to see what's going on. There's probably a lot more that wasn't listed, but you kind of just see that there's so much going on here in our community. A lot of it is synagogue related, some of it's not synagogue related. There's all sorts of fun things to go to. And there's basically every synagogue will have a sukkah. If you just go to services and you will have a meal, a snack in the sukkah is a wonderful way to participate in this holiday. So as I began by saying, Sukkot is a celebratory, joyous holiday, but it's kind of complicated. It's my favorite holiday, but there's got a lot going on. You have the sukkah, you have the lulav and etro, which are 2 separate different things. You have the first days of Sukkot, then you have Chol Hamoed days, which are still in the sukkah, you're still shaking the lulav, but it's not really a Shabbat atmosphere. Then you have this weird Hoshana Rabbah ritual. Then you have Shmini Atzeret. Then you have Simchat Torah. So it's just a lot going on. And that's why I feel like this is a very opportune holiday to offer this webinar, because it's often they've heard of Sukkot, you eat in a sukkah, you shake a lulav, but that's it. So we want to go a little deeper into the history, the rituals, and the diversity of holidays that are integrated within this one holiday of Sukkot. And the truth is, as soon as Sukkot ends, the Jewish calendar is kind of barren for about 2 months. Between now and Hanukkah, there's nothing going on. So we pack it all in this fall season, and then we take a little break, Hanukkah, and then after Hanukkah also, there's not that much going on. So go hard, really, really celebrate Sukkot this year. If you've never done so, this is a good year to celebrate Sukkot. It doesn't have the heaviness of the high holy days. It's rather a very communal, happy, celebratory time. And even if you are not a farmer, even if you're not someone who harvests things, it's a time to reflect on your harvest in your own life. What is it that you planted in the last year, that you worked on, and that you harvested? What is it that you're giving gratitude for? And how can you be gracious? How can you welcome people in to your homes, to your impermanent homes, and help build community here in Portland in a way that will help the Jewish community thrive and be resilient as we move forward? So, Shana Tova, everyone. That's my presentation, and glad to take a